symbiotes of the Marvel Universe are aplenty, being a whole species and whatnot. With the sheer amount of symbiotes, sometimes it's hard to keep track of them all. So today on Top 10 Nerd, I'm bringing you my list of the top 10 strongest symbiotes you forgot about. I'm Adam Andrews, and let's jump on in. Coming in at number 10, it's Zix, or however you say it. A mutant of the Klyntar or symbiote race, Zix was classified as one of the 5 most dangerous criminals the Shi'ar Empire had ever captured. Instead of making a symbiotic bond with its host, this symbiote would instead take complete control over whoever its host was, and instead of feeding off of adrenaline and chemicals produced in the body like other symbiotes might, Zix would instead just feed off the host itself, consuming their brains and their life essence until there was nothing left. Very pleasant. Other than that unique facet of its being though, it possessed all the same abilities of other members of its race. Like I said before, Zix was captured by the Shi'ar Empire for how gruesome it was, but after some time, it was used by the Shi'ar as a weapon instead, and that's where it truly showed that it was one of the most fearsome and terrifying symbiotes that ever stalked the Starways. Number 9, Hybrid. Hybrid isn't really one symbiote. Hybrid is the fusion of 4 of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes into a single symbiote. Riot, Lasher, Phage, and Agony all melded together and bonded to Scott Washington, a guard at the Vault, the supervillain prison. Now, allowing them to go free, Scott was fired and went through a pretty rough time, losing both of his legs as well as his brother. The 4 symbiotes, after reuniting with Scott, bonded with him, giving him back the ability to walk. The symbiotes, funnily enough, actually tried to curb the anger inside of Scott, which is not normally what they do. But then again, since his symbiote was originally 4 different entities, Scott also had to deal with 4 different voices in his head all the time, and that's kind of a downside in my opinion. Unfortunately, after Scott got his revenge on the ex-Easy gang that had crippled him, Eddie Brock Venom tracked down and took out Washington in order to eliminate all the evil symbiotes, which he didn't even do because the 4 symbiotes that made up Hybrid survived, were separated, and turned over to the United States government as a special symbiote team. Number 8, Sleeper. The Sleeper symbiote was very different in comparison to others birthed of the Venom alien. The youngest son of Venom, Sleeper was allowed to develop and incubate in a safe environment before attaching himself to a host, which gave it some notable differences and advantages. For starters, Sleeper had an altered appearance and didn't take on some of the characteristics of the Venom symbiote, like the big Spider-Man-like white eyes. He also didn't become a killing machine like most other symbiotes do. It was mature and cool, while kind of maybe a little bit smug. He has increased cognitive functionality, allowing Sleeper to take a much more measured approach to combat rather than just diving in headfirst like all the other symbiotes do. Sleeper is actually so intelligent that it lobotomized its host, Tel-Kar, and used him as a puppet in order to avoid being influenced by the Kree warrior. Other than its unique look and intelligence though, Sleeper also developed unique abilities like being able to bend light to camouflage itself and release neurotoxins that can put his enemies to sleep, and a whole bunch of other things. He's a pretty neat symbiote if I do say so myself. Number 7, Anti-Venom. The Anti-Venom was more like a symbiote suit that didn't have its own consciousness and could be completely controlled by its host, which is great. Eddie Brock gained the ability to use/control this symbiote after he had separated from the Venom symbiote, which left traces of itself in his body. Martin Lee, otherwise known as Mr. Negative, then used his powers to cure the cancer that Eddie had at the time, with the side effect of fusing the remnants of Venom with the negative powers and Eddie's own white blood cells. In the comics, this led to the new Anti-Venom symbiote emerging that had a lot of the same symbiote powers that Eddie had with Venom, plus unique healing powers like producing antibodies that can cure any known disease and removing any other impurities within a human body, which apparently includes other symbiotes because it allowed Eddie Brock to completely reject Venom when he tried to rebond. Number 6, Payback. Payback is Mavis Trent, an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who bonded with a symbiote that isn't exactly a member of the same race the other symbiotes like Venom and Carnage are. Her symbiote is more like an offshoot or cousin of the Klyntar race. Payback is an energy-based symbiote rather than an organically based one, which as you can imagine makes her rather unique, with some really cool different symbiote powers to boot. While having all the usual superhuman enhancements, Payback can also fly and produce electromagnetic manipulation in the form of microwaves and electromagnetic pulses. The symbiote itself had previously bonded to her father and had imprinted with his personality and memories, which then transferred to Mavis when they bonded. The symbiote also feeds off its host's bliss without hurting them at all, which actually sounds kind of lovely. Number 5, Scream. Donna Diego was a mentally disturbed woman who eventually became involved with the Life Foundation and later became a host for that last Life Foundation symbiote, the most powerful of Venom's first offspring, Scream. The Scream symbiote had gone off on her own, away from the four that became hybrid. Bonding with Donna, they became a villain at first and encountered both Spider-Man and Venom before she struck out attempting to find a way to peacefully bond with her symbiote. Although Donna was led into a trap and defeated by Venom anyways. Her powers were very similar to other Venom symbiotes, except with a few notable exceptions, such as her ability to extend her hair into tendrils, gotta love that prehensile hair, and she was also strong enough to defeat all four of her brothers, and Scream also controlled Donna's body after the woman had actually passed away, which is crazy because symbiotes are parasites and need a living host in order to survive. Number 4, Silence. Sweet, probably kind of angsty high school student Andrea Benton was accidentally bonded to a separate piece, or I guess we can call it a clone, of the Venom symbiote when Flash Thompson as Agent Venom tried to protect her, leading to her debut as the new sidekick, Mania. Now, Mania is pretty awesome and she looks super cool, but Andrea was eventually separated from the Mania symbiote after she was possessed by a demonic Hellmark, later bonding with the reborn Scream symbiote that we just talked about, arguably the most powerful of the Life Foundation symbiotes. Now, later on, Carnage corrupted the Scream symbiote and Andy used her Hellfire to wipe it out for good, or so she thought. Alchemax then used the symbiote's remains alongside a sample of the anti-Venom symbiote to create a somewhat brand new symbiote known as Silence. Andy bonded with this symbiote thinking it was Scream, but in actuality she became this new symbiote Silence instead, gaining a new corruptive touch deadly to other symbiotes as well as the usual symbiote powers, plus the Scream symbiote's hair tendril thingies, which are really cool. Number 3, Grendel. Grendel himself is a symbiote dragon, created billions of years ago by the Clintar or symbiote god, Null, manifesting itself from his blood. And if that doesn't sound cool, I don't know what to tell you, because it is really cool. This symbiotic dragon, alongside others like him, rampaged across the cosmos for billions of years with the purpose of attacking and slaying pantheons of gods in Null's name. It was actually more like Null was remote controlling the dragons to do his bidding, but hey, tomato tomato. Grendel is considered far more powerful than a standard symbiote and is capable of annihilating godlike beings. Standard symbiote weaknesses to fire and sonic weaponry are not as threatening, and these dragons could actually breathe fire themselves and shoot energy blasts. They are extremely fast, traveling through space at speeds similar to the Silver Surfer, and they're tough as nails. The Grendel itself could merge with other dragons and symbiotes to create a super large entity, making it even more dangerous. Now, for a time, Carnage was in possession of a fragment of the Grendel symbiote and was able to create his own army, gain the powers of a spirit of vengeance, resurrect Scream and make her part of his army, and was powerful enough to warrant an entire team of A-list Avengers to try and defeat it. Grendel is just off the chain. He's terrifying. Number 2, Mr. E. The symbiote god and creator, Null, was able to manipulate the living abyss he commanded in a number of ways, ultimately resulting in his army of symbiotes. But what kind of flew over my head was that Null actually went through a few experiments before getting the symbiotes just the way he liked them. Mr. E is the alias of a primordial proto-symbiote created by Null as one of those early experiments, of which there are indeed a couple. The proto-symbiote developed his own plans of galactic conquest, traveling to Earth, taking a host in the form of Louise Tuttle, and then infecting a number of scientists at Cape Canaveral, with offshoots of himself, turning them into shadow servants. This gave him a shot at using these scientists to modify a space shuttle to emit negatron particles, and he did that intending to transform the sun into a black star. That would basically take us all off the chessboard, except of course for those Mr. E wanted to turn into shadow servants to serve him as his own universe-conquering shadow army. This act pitted him against Captain Universe and saw him defeated, but Mr. E was brought back by Null, who decided to give his creation a second shot. So, wanting to impress Null, Mr. E stole the ebony blade from the Black Knight in the past, creating eclipses and bringing him into conflict with Ulik the Troll under the request of Uatu the Watcher, which is a big deal in comics. He was attacked by Spider-Man, Kang the Conqueror, Rocket Raccoon, and Captain Marvel, as well as the Troll Guy, and he was eventually defeated and given to the Collector. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's introduce Raze. Over time, Carnage, the symbiotic serial killer, has given rise to various new symbiotes, even though he initially disdained the way his alien species reproduced asexually. Now, while a number of these symbiotes came about naturally, some had a bit more of a sinister origin. A cult of elder god worshippers manipulated Carnage to fulfill their dark plans, aiming to resurrect the elder god Chthon. You may be surprised to hear that, but that would be pretty bad. They bestowed his symbiote with mystical abilities, granting Carnage the power to create and control new symbiotes. Now, faced with a relentless anti-symbiote task force, Carnage unleashed the creation of a symbiote called Raze, which looked a lot like Chthon, forcibly bonding it with FBI agent Claire Dixon. However, the Toxin symbiote stepped in and absorbed the Raze symbiote to thwart Carnage and Chthon's wicked schemes, seemingly putting an end to Raze's existence in the process forever, which is sad, but bad guys. And that's the list. Thank you guys so much for watching today on Top 10 Nerd. I'm your host, Adam Andrews, and I will catch you all on the Flippy Flop. But until then, stay safe and peace out, nerds. Whoop, whoop.